Hi everyone, my name is Rachel and I'm a dietetic intern at Health Promotion and Wellness. Now that it's fall, squash is fully in season. Butternut squash are great sources of complex carbs, making you feel full for hours, and definitely helps getting you into the spirit of the fall season. Butternut squash is also high in vitamins A and C, important antioxidants that will help keep your immunity up during these colder months. But sometimes not knowing how to prepare an ingredient like butternut squash can prevent you from incorporating them in the dishes you prepare. And while it may seem daunting to take on something like squash, it's easier than you think. For this reason, we're going to go over how to cut up some butternut squash and talk about ways you can prepare them as well. The equipment you'll need today is a chef's knife or a large sharp knife, a vegetable peeler, cutting board, a baking sheet, or a microwave-safe bowl. Before we start, you're going to need to pick out your butternut squash. When deciding which one to pick out, consider this: the weight, color, and the appearance. The color of the squash should be a solid beige color. You want to avoid picking one out that has dark spots or bruising because that could indicate it's rotting and has unwanted bacteria growing. You also want to make sure there's no deep cuts because bacteria can also grow in those spots. Minor scrapes are okay. Lastly, the size of the squash will vary, but you want to pick out one that feels a bit heavy for its size. Tougher veggies like butternut squash have a longer shelf life, so once you have your squash at home, storing it in a cool, dry spot like your cabinet can keep the squash good for up to a month or even more. Before cutting into the squash, if you have difficulties cutting into tougher foods or your knife isn't that sharp, you can pop it in the microwave for 1 to 2 minutes to soften it up. If you're doing this, don't forget to puncture some holes all around with a fork to help let out some of the steam. Once you're ready to prepare the squash, there's actually several ways you can cut it. The first and easiest would be if you wanted to roast it whole with the skin on. To do this, just slice off the stem and bottom off. Then cut all the way across the long side. Scoop out the seeds with a spoon. You can either compost them or save them to roast. After this, just brush the sides that are cut with olive oil and place that side facing down on your baking sheet. Place the baking sheet in an oven that's been preheated to 400 degrees for 45 minutes to 1 hour. When it's done, the skin will no longer be a solid beige color. Instead, it will be browned and might have some slight blistering on it. The inside will be soft and tender, and a fork will easily puncture. The inside will also be a dark orange and slightly caramelized around the edges. You can eat this as is or find a recipe like soup or a pasta sauce to add this to. The other option would be to dice the squash. To do this, you will start by slicing the stem and bottom off the squash, the same thing you would do if you were roasting it whole. Then you can slice it in half where the squash is curving inwards in the middle. Here the skin is much thinner, so it will be easier to cut. Using your peeler, you want to peel the skin off, making sure to remove all the green lines. These are very fibrous, kind of like celery, and won't add a good texture to the cooked squash. Once you're done peeling it, it should look something like this. Now take the fatter half, which is the bottom, and cut across lengthwise. Once cut, you'll take a spoon to remove the seeds. Now take one of the thirds and cut 1-inch strips along the long side. This is all you would do if a recipe calls for strips of butternut squash. Most of the time it will call for a dice. So to do that, you'll just need to turn the strips 90 degrees and cut across every inch. And there you have some diced or chopped butternut squash. To cook the diced squash, you can either roast it in the oven or pop it in the microwave. For both, you'll mix the squash with 4 tablespoons of olive oil and whatever herbs and spices you'd like in a mixing bowl. Personally, I like to use 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper, a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of Italian seasoning, and a teaspoon of garlic powder. Then you want to mix the butternut squash thoroughly to make sure that each piece is coated. If you want to roast them, transfer the butternut squash to a baking sheet. Then pop in a preheated oven at 400 degrees for 30 to 40 minutes or until fork tender, flipping halfway through. If preparing in the microwave, pop the butternut squash in the microwave for 5-minute intervals. When the microwave beeps, mix it around to see if it's fork tender. If the fork doesn't pierce through easily, pop it back in the microwave for another 5 minutes. Once done, it should be fork tender like this. Generally, it takes around 5 to 7 minutes, so keep an eye on your microwave. And there you have it. Now you know how to cut and prepare butternut squash so you can make some tasty and nourishing meals this fall. If you like this video, be sure to check out some of our other cooking food demo videos and recipes on our website, linked in the description box below. Thanks for watching!